Yes, Mayor.
Going to start the meeting. Welcome, everyone. Mary, roll call.
Mayor Brunner,
Here.
Vice Mayor Rich.
Here.
Commissioner Clark.
Here.
Commissioner Collins.
Here.
Commissioner McDonald.
Here.
And I'm looking for Pastor Orman. He's going to lead in the invocation.
I don't.
See the
Maybe
pastor.
having trouble with the storm outside.
Well, we're going to move on. And we're going to do the Pledge of Allegiance. Everyone rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Do I have any comments from the commissioners? Commissioner Clark?
Yes. Oh, okay. I have 3 comments, I think. 2 will be together. So I just wanted to always thank, I don't know if I should call a name, but I know that Michelle does a lot of emails with me, Michelle Bickett. I just want to thank the staff for always reminding us of events and sending us the invitations. And I stayed behind this weekend. I could have been elsewhere. And I went to the Memorial Day yesterday. And that was I wasn't a lot of people, but I think it was a significant event for our community. And in that regard, I know that we have all these events, especially when it comes to parades and things like that, that helps to define Stuart in some ways. And I don't know, Mr. Mortel, if we've ever thanked Mr. Weirden for some of the things that he does just to keep our, things flowing in our community. He assists in so many of these things on his own, and there are many other organizations and persons who do this on their own, not the city of Stuart, although I know that Mr. Leggett and his staff is always available when people have to use the city's facilities. But these are all done by community members. And I just wanted to thank Mr. Reardon especially. And, maybe Mr. Mortel can pass on to him that we really appreciate what he does, because it helps, for the city of Stuart, and that when we're all out there as commissioners and people who are leaders in the community, it helps. So I'd like to at least acknowledge Mr. Jim Reardon for helping out with the Memorial Day Parade, and for, of course, thank those who came out. The other thing is, so that's 2 things. The other thing is, I don't know if this is going to happen before or after the next meeting, but on June the 13th, on a Thursday, when there will be all sunshine and no rainstorms and everything like that, at 6 p.m. at the 10th Street Community Center, there'll be a town hall meeting, and I'm going to be hosting that town hall meeting, and it will talk a lot about the designation of the East Stuart neighborhood and some things that are happening on the city's website, and gathering information. So that's going to be on June the 13th, on Thursday at 6 p.m. I think that's it, Madam Mayor.
Commissioner Collins, do you have any remarks?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to respond to an odd comment that was made by a member of the public. I think it was the last meeting. It may have been the meeting before that. And the reason I want to comment on it, because there's some misunderstanding, I think, about how this commission operates. And she said, you shouldn't spend so much time talking amongst yourself. You should listen to us. So, the public. So, the commission never speaks to each other except here. I had someone come up to me the other day and said, do you have Troy's phone number? I said, no, I don't have Troy's phone number. I would never have Troy's phone number. I would never call him. We never get to discuss the issues together except when we sit here in front of you and have to figure out the best way to move forward for the city. Here's what does happen between the meetings. We read, and I know Commissioner Clark is very good at that, I'm getting better at this. We read an enormous number of your emails. We meet with you in person. We speak with you on the phone. That's who we talk to between meetings, is the public. So you shouldn't feel slighted that we do make a concerted effort to keep the public comment to 3 minutes. If you feel that you didn't have the opportunity to express fully your feelings regarding an issue, call us up. Call Michelle Vickett and say, I would like to meet with all the commissioners. I guarantee you, you will have an opportunity to sit down and talk to us. So I just wanted to make that, I just wanted to make that very clear to you. The other point I'd like to make is, however, that during that 3 minutes, I would ask that we as commissioners not interrupt members of the public. I know oftentimes we find ourselves wanting to respond to a criticism or answer a question, but if the person is speaking perhaps against the matter that you're for, you're questioning, you are in effect taking away their time, and you're sort of filibustering them. So I just think it's bad form for us. Let's just let them speak. Certainly if we want to speak to a member of the public, we're free to reach out to them. That's why you put the green cards in, so that we can contact you. And if you want to speak to us, feel free. Call us up, send us an email. We're more than happy to take the time. You are who we work for. So thank you, Madam Mayor.
Commissioner McDonald?
I just want to thank everybody who put together the Memorial Day parade and remembrance yesterday. As always, it was a really good event. Unfortunately, it was very, very hot, and I actually saw medical attention being given to one young person that I think was overheated. But it was a really good event, and it was nice to see so many people out there. So anyways, that's all I have tonight, and thank you.
Okay. Comments from our manager?
First, I wanted to say that the agenda item has a matter that's on the consent. I would ask that it be pulled for regular discussion. And the reason for that is twofold. Number one, it's the petition to the EPA that we discussed very briefly at the last meeting that I said that I would bring up to this meeting. And after it being reviewed, no. Hello. And then after it was published, it was pointed out by the Center for Biological Diversity that technically the language in the title did not authorize the city to join as a petitioner, but rather endorsed the petition. And I just wanted to make it clear, so we have some revised language, a revised title that I would like to be read in the record and voted on by the commission. We'll address that on the agenda item. The other matter, in response to Commissioner Clark, I have thanked Mr. Riordan almost every time I've seen him for the parades directly, and you're right, he does do a significant amount and has always done it at no financial benefit to himself, but at actually a financial cost to himself for I think about the last 20 years. And I also believe that this is his last year, as he has said that he's got some other things on his plate and that he may be wrapping it up as soon as I don't know if it's going to include this Veterans Day parade at the end of this year or not, but he was looking to pass the baton to someone else, and he will be sorely missed because he has spent a considerable amount of his own time and money to make sure that the city parades have all done very well. And then lastly, Commissioner Rich's comment, we can provide his home phone number for very late night calls for anybody that wants to call. Just let us know. But other than pulling the one item, we also, for the clarity, I have a fairly light agenda because I anticipated a lot of public comment and the agenda item, but we are going to have some discussion regarding the oyster garden from Ben as well, and we might as well get started. That's all I've got.
Okay.
Madam Mayor? Yes. Thank you. Can I forgot to mention that I was invited to be a member of the Indian River Task Force with regard to environment and biodiversity, and I'll be going to a meeting in Sebastian tomorrow evening, and it's a new thing that some professors, I think from FAU and some other places, they're doing some surveys and studies of communities along the Okeechobee waterway, and so they asked me to participate, and I'll be going to that tomorrow.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor,
Yes, Commissioner
move
McDonald.
for approval of the agenda, pulling item number 2 from the consent agenda.
Second.
I have approval, I have a second for item number 1, pulling number 2. We'll do all in favor?
Aye.
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 Now we can, I have Miss Andrea Creech, that she wants to speak on number 3. Hi.
Hi, my name is Audra Creech. I'm an attorney here. I got 2 mics now? Fantastic. All right. Okay. Now, okay. I feel like I'm at a press conference, which is really strange. Okay. Getting back to the topic. I'm Audra Creech. I'm a land use and zoning attorney here in the city of Stuart, and I happen to be tangentially involved with this project very, very limitedly, but I was able to hear about it through one of my good friends who's going to be speaking on this particular petition, and it's really nice when I can come up and be in favor of an environmental cause, because the environmental cause is not in direct conflict with private property rights. This is one of those times, which is really, I don't think any of us really want to have any goal whatsoever of being anti-environment. But it is very nice when I can look at a project and be like, wow, there really doesn't seem to be a whole lot of drawback to this. We're not taking away property that could be used for something. We're not taking it away from an owner. This is something we can do in an area that's already owned to a certain extent by either the city or the state in those waterways to fill a need. So I really encourage you all to take this as the gift that it is, an ability to help the environment without being in conflict with the money and time and effort that people spend on their property.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Audrey. And what Audrey's speaking of is number 2, supporting a petition from the CBD to the EPA on water quality.
No.
Oyster.
I'm for the Oyster Garden. I apologize.
Got it
3. I
mixed
thought the
up.
consent agenda had already closed and that this was public comment for commission action. So I am in favor of commission action number 3, which is the Oyster Garden project. Thank you.
Forgive me, Miss Audrey.
No worries.
For that one, too.
Here's public comment.
We have a public comment?
Yeah.
Okay. We have only one public comment. Okay. Mr. Reed, John Reed? I got ahead of myself. Welcome, sir.
Non-agenda item.
Yes, this is non-agenda items. Yes, my name's Sean Reed for the record. I just want to talk about giving feedback to the commissioners. I started door knocking back in January of this year. I do about 200 to 300 houses per week. So I hear a lot of feedback firsthand from the residents in the community, and they're not happy with many elected officials, whether it's the city or the county, on what they approve. They're tired of seeing projects get approved that meet half the parking requirements in the city. You know, if you can't park it, don't build it. And it's not your job to make sure their project is profitable at all. It's uncalled for and it shouldn't happen. So I'm going to keep door knocking over the next several months, and I'll report back every month on what they talk about, and we'll see if you guys are actually listening to them. I mean, you can do the math. 200 to 300 houses a week I do, and I started in January of this year, and I'm going to run until August of this year. So it's quite a bit. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other public comments? I see none. Are we on, what did I miss?
Due to consent.
Yeah.
Consent agenda. Move to approve the consent agenda.
I missed that. All right, moving to approve the consent agenda. We have approval and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Only number 2.
And number 2 is supporting a petition from the CBD to the EPA on water quality standards for cyanotoxins. Lee, could you read the resolution?
Sure, Madam Mayor. A resolution of the City Commission of the City of Stuart, Florida, authorizing the city to be a co-petitioner in a petition from the Center for Biological Diversity and other allies requesting the United States Environmental Protection Agency to establish new human health water quality criteria for cyanotoxins in the state's Class 1, 2, and 3 surface waters, providing an effective date and for other purposes.
Thank you. Is there going to be new language?
So he read the new language into
I
the
didn't-
title. If you can hand me that. Sure. Just for clarification, the original title said, City of Stuart authorizing the mayor to endorse, and the new language says authorizing the city to be a co-petitioner in the petition from the Center for Biological Diversity. So instead of it saying mayor endorse, it says the city is joining and is the actual co-petitioner, because I believe there's a reference to allies as well later in the language, and it says the Center for Biological Diversity and other allies. Those will be other petitioners that join. I don't know the entire list or the entirety of the list.
I'll move for approval.
Second.
Okay. We have approval. We have a second. All in favor?
No, we need a roll call.
And first, with public comment.
Madam Mayor, could we have Mr. Hogarth, city staff, speak to his
Ben?
understanding of this petition?
Thank you, Ben.
I know he's prepared.
That's okay. I was going to speak on the next item, but this one's totally fine too. The petition's pretty straightforward. There was a 2019 petition, if I remember the year correct, that it was previously, if you want to say attempted, but there were other organizations that are allies or party to this petition that had tried back then with the Center for Biological Diversity. For the public's edification, really what it is just asking the EPA administrator to come up with new standards by which the state will be held to account for those in relation to cyanotoxins and blue-green algae. And again, the problem in the state right now is that we have standards for blue-green algae as far as the pollutants that create it, which is numerical standards for phosphorus and nitrogen. What we don't have is if it's existing in the water body, if you have cyanotoxins in the river, for example, we don't have any kind of limitations or standards there, and the state is not necessarily compelled or required to create those explicitly right now. If the EPA sets that standard for Florida, then it becomes the new standard. So. But that's the best Reader's Digest version I can give for what it is, yeah.
Thank you,
Madam
Ben.
Mayor?
Commissioner McDonald?
Yeah, I'm so glad, actually, I'm glad Eve brought this to our attention. I think it was Eve that brought it. I grew up in Toledo, Ohio, and Toledo, Ohio, our lost summer of 2013 or 2014, Lake Erie had so much green toxic algae that the city of Toledo had to shut their water system down. And the water company, the city of Toledo Utilities, was having to deliver her cases of water to everyone's home for almost 600,000 people for about 3 weeks. And they were told they couldn't even shower with it. So, and then just over the weekend, my wife was watching something on television. Someone was talking, had one of these reality shows or something, and it had a picture showing somebody doing a selfie and with the water behind them. And I don't know where it was, but there was mountains in the background, so I don't think it was Florida. But the lake that was behind them was bright, like almost like a green screen green. And so this is a problem that is not just locally, not just in our state, but probably, I would say, worldwide. But so we definitely, I think, and I think it's something that definitely needs to be addressed, and I hope that we can be a small part of the solution, so.
And I'll say that Commissioner McDonald brings up a good point. The public who might be reading the title might not know what Class 1, 2, and 3 waters are. Class 1 waters are water that we use for potable use, for drinking water. Class 2 would be something like where we get oysters from for consumption. And Class 3 waters would be recreation. So basically anything that touches that humans touch and humans interact with. Yeah.
Ben, do any states have standards that you think are good and effective?
Yeah, it's a good question. I haven't done a full analysis of every state that has these standards in place. I know of a couple, I believe, that have introduced them. This is a global problem, by the way, as far as phosphorus and nitrogen eutrophication and pollution and all that. It's a huge problem. The problem is that it's used so ubiquitously that it affects so many people and so many businesses. It's kind of like our PFAS issue is how many jurisdictions, how many cities, communities in the entire country are going to be affected? That's the question. In this case, this is just for the state of Florida. That's what these standards are for.
To your point, Commissioner McDonald, they now have it in the fjords in Norway, which we view with their colder water temperatures, we would probably view that as unlikely, but nope.
Fortunately.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you, Commissioners.
I want to thank Eve Samples, Friends of the Everglades, for being here. Eve, over the years, has done so much for this city and this county. She was the editor of Stuart News for many years, always fighting for those discharges to stop. And thank you, Eve, for everything you do. Do we have any comments from the public on this resolution, 2024? No? Okay. Can we do it all in favor on this?
Roll call.
It's typically a roll call, but
Okay.
I'm not sure if funding is involved.
All right.
be honest.
We should do roll call no matter what.
Okay, we have a motion, we have a second. Roll call?
Commissioner Clark?
Yes.
Commissioner McDonald?
Yes.
Commissioner Collins?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Rich?
Yes.
Mayor Brunner?
Yes. In the consent calendar, now we have commission action, the Oyster Garden Project, along with the Downtown Riverwalk with the CCA. Lee, could you read Resolution 53-2024?
Sure. A resolution of the City Commission of the City of Stuart, Florida, authorizing the Coastal Conservation Association of Florida to coordinate the installation of vertical oyster gardens along the downtown Riverwalk for the purpose of improving water quality and providing safe habitat for oysters and other marine life. Further authorizing the CCA, which is the Coastal Conservation Association, to maintain, monitor, and collect data from the oyster gardens as stewards of the environment and the public trust, providing an effective date and for other purposes.
Ben?
Commissioners, good afternoon again. Just want to briefly introduce this item. I'm not actually going to do most of the speaking. I'm going to ask Matt from the CCA to come up here and introduce himself, the organization, what they do. Because they're a Palm Beach chapter, they're not here every day, and we know a lot of the Rivers Coalition members, and this is another great NGO and organization in the community, in the wider community, that does incredible projects. I think if you look at their history of their website, they're substantial projects, and we're kind of fortunate that they approached us. I believe they approached and spoke with Commissioner McDonald first. Staff then followed up. We communicated over the last several weeks, just working through some permitting questions that we had with state agencies, just to kind of get a general approval to move forward, make sure this wouldn't impact any research or any ongoing efforts out there. But with that said, let me bring Matt up to introduce himself. And
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to say, with LOSUM 8, I think I'm going to start saying LOSUM 24, and how this is going to be so great, and hopefully these oysters have a great life ahead of us.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up. I was also going to mention that LOSUM has officially been announced for kind of the final ruling moving forward, the final draft. Be another 30 days of public comment, and then after that, we expect it to get just total approval by August and be in effect by then, so we're very excited about that. The work isn't over, so what'll happen is the EA reservoir, knock on wood, will hopefully be coming online sometime around the turn of the decade to 2030, right? And before that, just like before the Hoover Dike kind of went into place, we're going to have to reevaluate LOSUM to include that as a new consideration. So our hope is to make the 40% a bigger number. what that is, we'll find out when we do the math again. And hopefully the math works out better for us then as well as it did this time. So, but let me bring Matt up to talk, and appreciate it again, Commissioners. Thank you.
Welcome, Matt.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Matthew Weishaupt. I am the Vice President of the Martin County chapter of the Coastal Conservation Association, volunteer with them. I am Martin County born and raised. I've been here for a little bit, and I've seen the changes in the water quality that we've had here. I know there are a lot of outside factors that impact us, but this is something we can do locally to make a market impact on it. As I'm sure everyone here knows, oysters are filter feeders. They filter out all the stuff we were just talking about that we don't want to have in the water anymore. And providing more habitat for them will help them do more of it. The project I'm proposing is called a vertical oyster garden. What we are proposing to do is to hang vertical oyster gardens, which are strands of dead oyster shells dried for 6 months prior to their arrival here, so that there's no risk of bringing in pathogens or anything like that, and be hung equidistant between each piling on the boardwalk. It'll effectively double the habitat range for oysters, and will probably have better pickup than the concrete pilings. There's nothing that an oyster attaches to better than another oyster. It'll go a long way towards the water quality, and will also add a lot of habitat for other organisms, crabs, fish in and around that.
Madam Mayor?
Commissioner McDonald?
Matt, thank you. You brought this to me, and I've been working with Jim and getting you guys.
And we appreciate your help.
One of the things that I didn't mention to you, but I think it was with Mary when we did the oyster. So I actually put together an oyster recycling program with our restaurants. It was, Mary, was that 10 years ago?
Yeah.
Maybe.
That was a while ago.
Yeah, so we actually have an oyster recycling program for the oyster shells that all the restaurants are doing, and we did that in conjunction with Florida Oceanographic, our sanitation department, and it didn't come without challenges from the recycling aspect. But you also, one of the things you remember is all the oysters have to be dried for 90 to 180 days to ensure the pathogens, because the oyster shells that we're consuming here are not from here. They're not local oysters. They're coming from the Northeast or up in Apalachicola, or I don't eat oysters, so I'm not sure exactly where they come from, but they're coming from all over the oysters that are being consumed are coming from all over the place. And what amazed me when we did this program a number of years ago was how many oysters are actually consumed, how many shells we produce. So this is a great program. I was really happy you brought it to me, so thank you.
Yep, you are welcome, and we really appreciate and thank you for your help bringing the project to this
I
point.
also want to mention to the commission that there have been oyster programs and different issues where they've done the hanging oysters from docks. And I know when my kids were younger, they participated in it. And unfortunately, one of the summers that they spent a lot of money to put the oysters out, we had the deluge of discharges from the lake, and all of the oysters were killed from the bad water that came through, and it was too much fresh water for them, and they all died. So the good news is that with LOSUM coming forward the way it is right now, and the lake being able to retain more water than it has in the past, we could actually see a program where the oysters survive and filter the water and actually provide fishing opportunities as well. Because I know in the past when we did it, wherever those oyster beds were thriving, the fishing was phenomenal.
So just to that point, there's one big advantage to the vertical oyster gardens specifically as opposed to a bed restoration project. When you get those deluges of water from the lake that kills everything, the oyster beds break apart and they fall apart. And there's a specific height in the water column that oysters thrive best at, the intertidal zone. Well, with the hanging oyster garden, if a deluge comes through, even if it kills the oysters, the hanging garden will remain and the habitat will be there to regenerate more oysters on.
Great.
Madam,
I'll move for approval.
second, can I ask a question,
Yes.
Madam Mayor?
Commissioner Clark, yes.
So, Mr. Baggett and Mr. Leggett, what is the liability to hang these things on the on the boardwalk woodwork that's there now. I've known about the bags being put out into the shallow areas and, but having them, have somebody actually go around and hammer or do something in order to hang these bags on the city-owned boardwalk area, I just want to see how that happens and what's the potential liability.
I can't say that there's going to be no exposure to liability. Something there's could be variations on the nails. There could be way it's hung, or
Yeah, but
I
just the
can't
worker
eliminate
coming
it.
out for the weekend and
I
getting
think we have more
hurt.
liability in having a meeting.
So
Other people
you
coming
think it's
out.
gonna be okay? All right.
Yeah.
and the city will still enjoy its sovereign immunity, obviously. So
Okay.
the liability is limited.
Are you going to have the assistance of our river kids?
We would love to have them there, yes.
Yeah, because I know they, at the Rivers Coalition meeting, they seem to be excited about that prospect. So I'm sure you know how to reach out to them.
Yes, Ben is going to be helping me connect with
Okay.
everyone.
Great.
Commissioner Copeland?
Do you have some sense, I'm sure, with your position, how efficient and effective these vertical oysters are? Like how much water can be filtered in what period of time, some sort of metric?
So I'm not familiar with those numbers. I am a volunteer for the CCA. I'm a financial advisor by trade. I know they filter a lot. I do not know exactly how much a lot is.
Ben?
Isn't it there's like 50 gallons of,
I'm not a biologist either. I just remember reading that it was about 50 gallons, I think, in a given day, any one oyster. And these oyster gardens have, I don't know how many oysters at the end of the day, but a substantial amount.
It'll get several inches thick.
And what are they,
Yeah.
what specifically do they filter out of the water in terms of pollution?
Again, I think a microbiologist probably be better to answer that because it's a lot. Obviously, it's not just about filtering out nutrients like phosphorus and nitrogen. It's also the stuff that proliferates as a result of those. So if it's filtering all of that, the hope is that it would limit, at least locally in the area, it could potentially just have a cleaning effect. I don't know if we've ever done a project of this scale before because, again, it's something that they have to get out there and kind of see where you can put along the Riverwalk. They're supposed to be spaced about, 10 feet apart?
10 feet closest, our proposal is specifically equidistant between each piling.
Okay, so at a max, just based on the linear footage of the dock system and the Riverwalk, we're talking between the pier and the fishing, maybe 3,000 linear feet, and at 10 feet spacing, so that's probably a maximum of about 300 of these that they can put out there. Even if it's 200, again, I don't know of any projects that have had that kind of scale with oyster gardens in the area.
Are we looking at this as sort of a first step to potentially do more of? Because that would be my thought. You know,
I think we should, my
see if
personal
this
belief is,
successful.
yeah, anything that we can do along, whether it's buffered shoreline projects. I've talked to some engineers locally, and there's a difference in the types of buffered shoreline projects, ones that functionally do wave attenuation versus others that just look really nice. So there's a lot of stuff that, from a vulnerability kind of resiliency standpoint with, just all of the, the factors that we have of all human pollution kind of going into the water. How can we mitigate our runoff? How can we mitigate what we're kind of the oil slicks that are going in? And then at the same time, also have an effect of just shoring up our actual shoreline so it's not eroded, periodically. So all of those factors come together.
And also from an asset standpoint, it seems like the more of these that you have a better case for why you shouldn't be polluting our water. The more of these gardens that are throughout the St. Lucie.
Yeah, I mean, the
Should be one more
dream,
consideration for why you shouldn't be discharging and killing them.
I agree, and the dream is really to have a natural shoreline, and you see a lot of places now are seeing that something, especially with hurricane season coming around, that planting mangroves, thick mangrove vegetation. I know it's unsightly as far as being able to have a clear view of the river, but it does help, and it helped on the West Coast in certain areas that had them. Did not see anywhere close to the surge that like Fort Myers saw. So this is just kind of, there's a lot of issues. that all of the environmentalists are kind of talking about how to make a project like this work. But as far as oyster gardens, this is the largest project I've seen that we've done. I know Mike mentioned ones from years past, but those were using private docks. This is the entire linear footage of our Riverwalk, so it's not a small area.
Last question is, we're not paying for this, right? Mike?
We paid for the dock, and we've got staff here now, and so are we paying cash to them? No, but is it going to cost time and money? To some extent, yes, but the city has been dedicated to the health of the river for a long time.
So
and
man-hours
the
and
cost of it
installation
is not anywhere close to
Volunteer.
affecting the
It's
benefit.
volunteer. That's what I was trying to fish out.
Right. And what I think is also important too, and anybody, I'm sure the CCA would love to have volunteers to help. What I would say is the one committal thing that we have that should probably be stated is once the oysters grow, the spat grows on these oyster gardens, getting to this point didn't require any permitting, but if for whatever reason we had to remove them from the water, that would be a permit process. It's not it's not the worst thing in the world. It's just remember it's a lot easier to put these in than it is to take them out because of just environmental permitting.
Can they be relocated once they're in?
Yeah, relocating it would be an easier permit. I think most of the permitting is concerned with consumption, and these cannot be consumed just because of the nature of the river. So,
Okay. Thank you for all the volunteers that are going to be doing this, by the way. And with that,
President, thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Okay. All right, we have a motion approval of Commissioner McDonald, a second by Commissioner Rich. Do we have any public comment regarding the oyster beds, the oyster gardens? I see none. Roll call?
Mayor Brunner,
Yes.
Commissioner Clark,
Yes.
Commissioner McDonald,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Rich, Commissioner Collins.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Clarity Point, PUD. Lee, will you read the rest of that for me?
Sure. And just briefly, as I mentioned in the last meeting, we are having two hearings tonight. The first is a quasi-legislative hearing on the comprehensive plan future land use map amendment. And then the second one will be a quasi-judicial hearing involving the zoning of the same property. All right, so the title on this one is Clarity Point PUD. PUD stands for Planned Unit Development, and it's a small-scale comprehensive plan future land use map amendment located at 500 Southeast Indian Street. Ordinance number 2529-2024, an ordinance of the City Commission of the City of Stuart, Florida, amending the comprehensive plan future land use map for an approximate 9.46 acre parcel of land from multifamily residential to commercial future land use designation, amending the future land use map, providing directions to the city clerk, providing for repeal of all ordinances in conflict, providing for severability, providing for codification, and providing for an effective date and for other purposes.
Thank you. Jody, your presentation, please.
Thank you. Good evening, Madam Mayor Brunner and members of the board. My name is Jody Kugler, the Development Director with the City of Stuart. And tonight I present agenda item number 4, a small-scale future land use and map amendment for our site-specific property located at 500 Southeast Indian Street. The applicant submitted a petition to amend the existing 9.46 acre site from a multifamily residential and designation to a commercial land use designation. A small-scale comprehensive plan may be adopted for properties for less than 50 acres or fewer by the City Commission. By public notice of requirements outlined in Section 11.02.00 of the City of Stuart Land Development Code on April 5th, 2024 and May 4th, 2024, the applicant mailed notices to surrounding property owners located within 300 feet of the subject parcel, and a sign was posted on the subject property displaying the meeting dates and description of the proposed petitions. Additionally, a public newspaper ad was displayed in a local newspaper on May 17, 2024. The 9.46 acre subject parcel outlined in yellow is located at 500 Southeast Indian Street, situated on the south side of Southeast Indian Street, approximately 580 feet east of the intersection of Southeast Canner Highway and Southeast Indian Street. The history of the site: in 1997, this property was annexed into the city and was assigned a commercial land use. In 2004, an ordinance was approved by the City Commission at that time, amending the future land use to a multifamily residential. In 2005, the council approved a residential plan unit development to construct 66 multifamily development, and this development was never constructed. In 2017, the ordinance was repealed and established Clarity Point RPUD to develop an 84-unit assisted living facility with memory care for the 9.46 acres, and amended the future land use from multifamily to commercial for the remaining 1.92 acres. In 2017, the ordinance was approved to abandon the 40-foot right-of-way within the Clarity PUD, and in 2018, a resolution was approved for the plat for the Clarity PUD. The adjacent property is, in zoning, is to the north is the crossing, the multifamily residential within the city of Stuart. To the south is located in the Martin County and is undeveloped. To the east is a commercial planned unit development known as Palmetto Edge Shopping Center within the city. And to the west is a 5-acre drainage tract as part of a planned development. Policy A7.1 multifamily is the existing use, land use. 1 or 2 or more dwelling units per building includes single-family detached duplex, townhomes, garden homes, foster homes, adult congregate living facilities of 4 or fewer unrelated residents on a zero-lot line residence. Also allows for public facilities, churches, daycare centers, schools, and distribution substations are allowed within the existing future land use today. The proposed future land use is located within the City of Stuart's Comprehensive Plan Policy A7.1 parens M, which is commercial. Land uses are activities predominantly connected with the sale, rental, and distribution of products or performance of professional and non-professional services, includes retail sales, service establishments, businesses, professional and other offices, shopping centers, financial institutions, restaurants, entertainment, hotels, motels, and other temporary lodging. An amount of multifamily residential and indoor industrial uses are allowed. Mixed-use projects are allowed as well. Also, public facilities and electric distribution substations are allowed. To evaluate a small-scale future land use amendment, these are the 3 criteria that include, coming from the state statute, the ability of facilities and services. At the time that this was changed from from commercial to residential, this was established, along with the suitability of the plan amendment for the proposed use, considering the character of the undeveloped lands, soils, natural resources, and historical sites, resources on site, and the minimum of land needed to achieve the goals and requirements of this section. In evaluating a small-scale comprehensive plan amendment, staff has determined the maximum build-out per the existing future land use and the proposed. If the existing land use, the maximum, if you were to develop the site with residential, you could develop up to 284 units for the 9.46 acres. You also can develop the property with 30% of non-residential, which is 370,869 square feet. If the property was changed to a proposed commercial future land use, you can have 15 dwelling units, or you can develop it to a maximum of 618,116.4 square feet. On March 14, 2024, the local planning agency held a public hearing for the small-scale comprehensive plan amendment petition and voted to forward a recommendation of approval to the City Commission. The motion was passed 3-1, with Mrs. Peterson voting nay. This petition conforms to the criteria outlined in Section 11.01.07 of the City of Stuart Land Development Code, Florida statutes, and is consistent with the City of Stuart Comprehensive Plans plan's goals, objectives, and policy. Staff recommends the City Commission grant approval for the small-scale future land use amendment from the multifamily to the commercial future land use for the, I apologize, for the 9.46 property located at 500 Southeast Indian Street. Staff is here for any questions. This concludes our presentation, and I do believe the applicant has a presentation.
Okay, thank you. This is a quasi-legislative hearing procedure. Let's see here, any of the commissioners, please come forward. I think we have to swear them in. Yeah,
We don't need to swear them in during this process. That'll be during the quasi-judicial.
okay,
So-
okay. Then, give your presentation. Thank you, sir.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Brad Curry. Tonight, I'm representing the applicant requesting a small-scale future land use amendment to a 9.46-acre property located near the intersection of Indian Street and Canner Highway. I do have a very brief PowerPoint that I would like to go through. The property is 9.46 acres, but it's really made up of two separate properties. One is the existing assisted living facility, which is about 4.67 acres, and then the remaining is 4.79 acres is the lake retention area and the preserve area and the access. Future land use amendments are something that, as planners, we do a lot of. The future land use is set as part of the comprehensive plan, but things do change that do require land use amendments. It was interesting, this property started its life in Martin County, started its life as commercial, got annexed into the city, adopted a commercial land use designation when it came into the city, changed the entire, as it was in the city of Stuart, changed everything over to residential, and then a little bit later, the small out parcel got changed back to commercial. So when we talk about land use plan amendments, they do happen all the time, and in this case, on this single property, it's happened 3 separate times over the history of the property. We are familiar with the location. Staff did an excellent job presenting it. It's a fairly secluded property, meaning that typically when we look at properties like this, there could be developments directly adjacent to them. In this case, we have the Martin County stormwater area for the Canner Highway and Indian Street improvements directly to the west of us. We have the multifamily to the north across Indian Street. We have commercial uses to the east of us, and to the south of us is the preserve area for, I believe, the Willoughby community. So it's a pretty secluded site overall. There's no uses directly adjacent to it. A zoom in of the property. Again, I talked about the 2 separate properties. You can see it a little bit better here. The assisted living facility is the 4.67 acres, and then the other property, the preservation lake, is undeveloped as 4.79. When we talk about development potential, that 4.79 it has a conservation easement on it because it is preserve area, and there also is a lake that drains the commercial portion. So that property is undevelopable, even if we change the land use just to keep it consistent, but it could very well have stayed the exact same land use. There's no development potential on that property. Next slide. I like this slide. We stated that this started out as commercial. You can kind of see the commercial at the intersection. Typically in planning, we don't like commercial to spread throughout. We call it strip commercial that goes all the way from one intersection all the way to another intersection. We like to have our intensities and densities at the intersections. And there's typically a western extent in this case of where commercial is established. So as you can see, the property, the land use map, the future land use map shows commercial directly at the intersection of Canner and Indian Street. And then as you go further to the east, it actually goes back to multifamily, and then it goes to commercial again. This is a rarity. We don't normally see this in planning. We typically see commercial at the intersection. There's typically an extent of the commercial at the intersection, and then it goes to other types of use. So the fact that you have this isolated commercial section to the east of the property is a little bit different than what we normally see. So the request to change the subject property to commercial, as you see on the screen, is completely acceptable in planning theory and in this sort of circumstances. Next slide. Jody went through the state requirements, but I also wanted to talk about the city of Stuart requirements. The City of Stuart requirements in section 110107 specify the small-scale comprehensive plan amendment application process. And there are several criteria on 110107G1 that states what the City of Stuart must review in order to approve or review the small-scale comprehensive plan amendment. The first is that the existing land use pattern. We kind of went over that already. We talked about the fact that right now there is an isolation of a commercial parcel, and this request before you will allow for the parcel that's now isolated to become part of the overall commercial. So we believe that the existing land use pattern, that we are actually making that better by asking this change. The next is the possible creation of isolated land use classification unrelated to adjacent nearby classifications. I just established that this request will actually correct what I believe was done incorrectly in the past. The next is the population density pattern of the area and possible increase or overtaxing of the load on the public facilities such as schools, utilities, and streets. So when we review these, you saw that Jody put up the maximum development potential. So we did see that the maximum development potential was about 15 dwelling units and about 600,000 square feet of commercial. The reality is you can never build that on here, but we have to show that as a maximum. There's water and sewer that services the property. There is capacity for fire rescue. And in this case, we're requesting to go to commercial, so there really would not be an increase on schools, which are the typically things that we look at when we look at concurrency and demand on public services. The next is a possible overloading of city sewage collection, treatment, and disposal facilities. We've already talked about that there is existing capacity to service this property for water and sewer. The possible overloading of the city's drainage system. This is an existing site. The drainage patterns are already set. We have a South Florida permit, or the property has a South Florida permit that we are not allowed to exceed. So that is already set. The existing classification boundary in relation to existing conditions on the subject property. Again, we think that the existing classification is not correct, that the isolated commercial to the northeast of the property is causing the problems. And then the existing change or changing conditions that make the passage of the proposed amendment necessary or appropriate. Again, we believe that the change of use for this property is appropriate. We are not proposing to build any additional building on this property, simply change the use of the existing building. And then the impact of the proposed amendment upon living conditions in the adjacent neighborhood. I established as well when we went through the properties around, there's really not an adjacent neighborhood. I believe the closest one is Crescent, Willoughby Crescent, which is about 950 feet away from the subject property. The impact of the amendment on the flow of light and air to adjacent areas. Again, it's a single-story facility right now. If it were going to be multifamily if we were going to redevelop it as multifamily, it would be multiple stories. Commercial development is usually single stories, so we believe that the request is consistent with that aspect. The impact of the proposed amendment upon property values in the adjacent area. We believe that having a change of land use from residential to commercial will not have a negative impact on the surrounding property, especially when you take into account that it's significantly buffered for any adjacent residential. The impact of the proposed improvement of the development on adjacent property in accordance with existing regulations. We don't believe that the change in commercial land use will have any impact on adjacent properties. And then the existence of other adequate sites in the city for the proposed use classifications already permitted such use. So that would be a tough one. I mean, there is other commercial property that could be purchased for this use. We think that in this case, the specifics of this property, the fact that it's set up the way it is, the way the building is laid out, that it's perfect for our use. But from a commercial standpoint, we still go back to the fact that the pattern of land use consistency with having the isolated commercial parcel to our northeast makes this a fair and expected request. So in summary, we believe the request is consistent. I'm sorry, we don't believe. The request is consistent with the City of Stuart Comprehensive Plan and Land Development Code as demonstrated in the presentation that you just had, plus staff's presentation. We have staff support for the request. And we also have an LPA recommendation of approval for this project. We heard concerns at the last meeting about the lack of multifamily future land use in the city of Stuart, and I've spent a lot of time thinking about that. And I think that the city of Stuart is a little bit different than most cities in that when they annex property in, if it is vacant, typically it gets annexed in with a land use and zoning that gets assigned to it at the time of annexation. And for the most part, historically, that zoning designation has been some sort of residential or commercial PUD, which locks in the type of development that's there. So I think it's okay, it's expected that you would not have vacant multifamily here, because if it's got annexed in and it got a multifamily land use, it's gonna get a multifamily zoning and it should get developed, or it should be approved for development. There's very few instances of just vacant multifamily land in the city of Stuart, and that's just because of the way it's been developed. Just before we got here tonight, I typed in, on apartments.com, I typed in, Stuart, Florida for apartments, and I found that there were 886 rental units on the market today in the city, or not necessarily in the city of Stuart, but what apartments.com said is Stuart, Florida. So there is, I believe, a considerable amount of multifamily apartments on the market today. That concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. Jason Ackner would like to get up and just say a few words. And if at the end of the public comment, I'd like to have the ability to come up and rebut or address any of the comments that were made by public. Thank you.
Do any of the commissioners have any questions for the petitioner? Okay. Jason, come forward. Thank you, sir.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Commissioners, City Attorney, City Manager. Brad did an excellent job explaining the land use. I mean, just a couple of things I wanted to point out. When the property was annexed into the city, it was annexed as commercial, so at the time that was part of the comprehensive plan. It made sense. We're not asking for anything strange, unique here. We're just asking for it to go back to what it was. In the staff presentation, you see that property was approved for 66-unit development, and then it sat vacant for 12 or 16 years. I forget the math. I don't have it in front of me, but it was at least 12 years that it just sat vacant. Nobody developed it there. I don't know of any places really where you have a commercial retail strip center using a residential piece of land for drainage and retention, and you have that here, which is odd. And the only reason that drainage area retention is residential was because of the approval for the assisted living memory care facility. And also, I just wanted to point out in staff's presentation, the calculation for the density of the residential homes that could be built, that was based on the whole 9 acres and change, where you've got the preserve, the retention, the lake. So it's really half those amount of residential multifamily units that could be built. I think it was 280, so you're looking at 140. It wouldn't be 280. And, the only other thing I just don't understand, if anybody would like to elaborate, obviously you don't have to. If you don't want to, it's your prerogative. The land use was never an issue at the LPA. The land use was never an issue at staff meetings. The land use was never an issue when I initially met with pretty much each one of you guys as commissioners. It was never brought up, and I'm just curious when and why the land use became such a big issue when we're just trying to turn it back to something that the city determined was appropriate to begin with. Anybody want to?
I have no questions.
No? Okay. You guys have any questions for me or no?
No? All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Can we take a vote on this and then have the public come forward?
You can't vote before the public.
Okay. Ms. Petit, Barbara? Is it?
Yeah, remind them that.
Hi.
Oh, yes, I do need, this is for the land use change only, and that's what we'll talk about now. And then when the number 5, then we'll talk about that, but when it comes. So this is just speaking for changing the land use.
I think I want number 5. Okay, thank you.
I want to remind everyone of that, if they want to wait or speak now, or...
No comments that are specifically about the nature of the project, but just the land use.
Yeah,
Commercial versus multifamily land use
okay.
for number 4.
Will you fill out a green slip? Speak on 4? And your name? Come forward, Mr. Name, I'll find it. Thank you, sir.
Hello, I'm James Namer, 1273 Southeast Brewster Place, Stuart, and I want to make my comments against the change of future land use. I think Brad actually made my argument for me in a lot of ways, because in there on his map that he didn't mention, right near this facility is Willoughby Trace, tucked right behind those commercial properties, right on the corner of Willoughby and Indian. So there is commercial property already mixed in there. And the items that he highlighted, saying it's off the road, it's got empty land to the, the west of it, empty land to the right of it, makes it a very appealing spot to put residential property. Also, it's walkable to shops, restaurants. It's a place I would probably want to live if it was built. And there is a well-documented shortage of family housing here in the city of Stuart. And so I think you're missing an opportunity here, letting this go back to commercial property. And just because everything around it is commercial doesn't mean it has to be commercial. I lived in an area that was well thought out and well developed, and a walkable community that had a mixed use of commercial and residential. So just because one already exists doesn't mean that's what everything should be. And I think that's actually some of the problem out there that you see. It's boom, all commercial and very mixed up. So I think you're missing an opportunity here, letting this go from multi-family to commercial, and I'd hate to see you sacrifice it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We have Mr. Reed, I see you back there. 3 minutes.
All right. Sean Reed. So at the LPA meeting, I did point out the land development code. I did hand Mr. Mortel a copy as well. And the biggest issue is when you look at Martin County versus the city of Stuart, this project would never fly in Martin County. The applicant wouldn't even apply for this future land use change. I would specifically look at sections 3.86B and also 3.86D. It says 3.86B, such facility shall at no time exceed 75 persons receiving inpatient treatment. They're asking for 140. It also mentions in section 3.86D, such facility shall not be located within 1/2 mile of another such facility, which this one would be. So if we looked at Martin County's land development code versus the city,
Mr. Reed.
there's no limitation. So thank you.
I would just
I wanted to,
Yeah, I would just comment to the board that you're required by law to follow the City of Stuart's code and regulations, and so if other municipalities or counties' codes and regulations are referenced, they can't have any bearing on your decision.
yes. Yes, sir. Your name?
Walter Lloyd. I'll turn this in.
Thank you, Mr. Lloyd.
Nice to see you this evening. So just after hearing that comment, there are people involved, whether it's called city or county, and we live there, and our quality of life depends on it. When I see this sort of change being done, you say you can't mix it with the next agenda item, but it's being done for that reason. So I also agree that the residential is a much better use when you have all of us residents in that area than we would in joining with the Costco and all the other commercial you've thrown in there. Add that in. So I'm asking you to disapprove it because I know what's coming.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
We're speaking on 4. Yes, ma'am? Do I have your slip?
For number 5, but I would,
Only on 4.
You can speak on 4 if you like.
I
You just have
can.
to fill out a green slip.
Okay, well, I
Your
didn't know
name?
it was going, okay. Anyway, I agree exactly with the residents. My name is Diana Asker. I'm a Realtor here for 28 years right now. I'm licensed 44 years. I've sold 649 properties in both this county and St. Lucie County. I'm very much involved with elderly people. My clientele is usually in their 80s and older. And when I came here, this was 28 years ago, I was younger too. But I can tell you that the facility, when it was a memory facility, this was a very desirable thing. We have shortages of that. We have waiting lists. I have my clients trying to get in, and I know there's waiting lists for this. More important than what the next proposal is going to be on number 5. I would hope that somebody is going to continue either a memory or assisted living as it is proposed for. That's what you approved before in 2017, and I would hope it would continue what we need here. I'm a resident, I live right in Willoughby Glen, and we love the area. We walk the area all the time. So I hope, and I love listening to what you all had to say. So thank you, and I'll speak on the next one.
I see no more comment. Now we'll,
Mr. Acker.
Mr. Acker, you have 3 minutes.
Keep it way under. The previous commenter, Ms. Askew, that got up, she wrote me a personal email saying that she wanted to know more about our services for friends and family and that she was genuinely interested, and asked me about 30 questions as if I have the time to give a tour to someone that for a project that's not even close to approval and probably won't get approved at this point. As far as a shortage of memory care and ALF, that's completely false. I've met with 5 of them that went out of business in the last 9 months alone. There's not a shortage of them. There's an abundance of them. That's why this one's out of business. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Any more comments? Comments from the commissioners?
Mark Breckbill, 208 Southeast Osceola Street, Stuart, Florida. My only comment relative to this in terms of land uses, that at this point, this is the busiest intersection in all of Stuart. We made it worse. I'm talking about future use. We made it worse with Costco, but we made it worse. We're putting other facilities in there. There's tons of traffic. I'm not sure. I mean, we've got 8 lanes at this intersection. I'm not sure that intersection could handle any more traffic than what it's already got. So when you're looking at land use here, I think now based on where we're at, I think you have to look at what kind of ultimate traffic flow is going to be coming into this facility. So I would just suggest that you take that into consideration and look at that. And certainly a low-density residential is probably going to have less impact than a high-density commercial. And I'm not sure that site can hold that much commercial anymore based on what's already at that location. Anyway, that's
Will
why.
you fill out the slip for me? Okay. All right, I see no other.
I put 4 in.
Just give me your name.
My name's Jack Napleotis. I live at 842 Southeast Westminster Place.
Or you have to stay, you do have to stay at the,
He's just showing you where you live.
yes, yeah.
That's about 750
Oh,
from this facility, and it wasn't mentioned in the original presentation. Now, it's a big concern of ours that this facility stays as it is right now, because we don't want to be nervous every single day thinking about what that facility has. And I've seen the structure integrity of that building, and we're very concerned about it. And most of my neighbors are right here that all live there at Willoughby Glen, and we're asking you, please, keep it as it is. Thank you.
did you fill out a green slip?
Yes, I have 4 and 5 on mine.
Thank you.
I didn't fill out a green slip, but I will, could I?
4, yes, sir. The land change from residential to commercial.
Yes. My name is Jim Ladd, and I live in Willoughby Crescent. One of the questions I have for the board in considering this land use change, if you go ahead and turn this back to commercial, then the facility, and then you don't approve the request, then you've got a piece of property then that somebody will probably go back to and put a assisted living facility in, and you have to go back to another land use change in order to accommodate that. So I think there has to be some thought given to that before, and that pertains to 4 and 5, but I think you might be wise to give that some thought. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Just fill that out for me. Just when I say there isn't there. Yes, sir? Have you filled out a green slip?
Yes, I did.
And your name?
Michael Girardi.
Mr. Girardi, please come speak. Gerard, I didn't. Gerard. I think I got the wrong one.
Good evening. So I live in Willoughby Glen, which is adjacent to the proposed building and use. And like my neighbor Jack mentioned, we're a community of 100 homes. And contrary to what the gentleman indicated, we are not, this facility will not be secluded from our property. It is directly adjacent to our property, and there is direct access to our property. We currently have been experiencing problems in our property with vagrants, homelessness, etc. I think Sheriff Snyder said it all when he indicated what the results of this being approved might be for our community, and directly for our community and for our neighborhood. And contrary to one of the witnesses for the developer mentioned, I could tell you from personal experience that addiction is not hereditary. It is self-inflicted. And most of these people, unfortunately, I'm talking from personal experience, end up back where they started. And as Sheriff Snyder indicated—
It's land change,
Excuse me?
or just on the switching from residential to commercial.
Okay, well, I still have 32 minutes or a minute? Okay.
Yes, sir.
So I think the result's going to be when these people walk out or quit, they're going to be in our neighborhood committing many problems for us. So I strongly advise or suggest that the board do not approve this change. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any more? I see none. We have I guess I can move forward. A motion for approval?
Madam Mayor, the applicant's representative asked to address.
That's right, correct. I apologize. 3 minutes, sir.
I'm completely okay. Again, Brad Curry for the record. I think most of the discussion that was into the details was about the specific use, and so I don't really want to comment on that at this time. I mean, I think that I felt like, for the record, I said that, this piece going to commercial, it was previously commercial. There were some discussions about it changing back to residential. Again, that's the nature of this business. While we don't like to go back and forth from commercial and residential multiple times on the same property, it's already happened on this property. So if it were to get changed to commercial and something were to happen where the PUD didn't get approved and someone wanted to go back to residential, it would happen. That sort of stuff happens all the time, and this property is a prime example of it. I think the land use has changed at least 3 times on this property, so it's not out of the ordinary. So I just wanted to put that for the record, but I'd be happy to answer any other questions you guys have. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Can I get a motion for approval? I see none. We move forward. That'll be the end. We need.
Well, you don't need any clarification from me. Are there any motions on the board on this agenda item?
Can I ask you, Mike, and or Lee, sort of the difference between the implications of it doesn't seem like there's a motion for approval brewing, but sort of having it die on the dais effectively versus a motion to deny from a procedural standpoint?
In essence, it would just die if there's no motion for approval. There could be obviously a motion for denial, but if you do
Would there
nothing.
be a difference between the two?
Well, from the perspective of the agenda item itself, until such time as there's 3 affirmative votes by the commission, the staff has a file number that is open and still an active agenda item. So effectively, if there was no motion tonight and it died for lack of a motion, the applicant could come back into the city and ask staff to place it on another future agenda,
Right.
and it would still be an open agenda item.
Versus if we
Versus
if we
there
motion to
was
deny
a
and there was
motion
3
to
votes.
deny, depending on if it didn't garner 3 votes and it failed, it would have the same outcome, because the reason that we don't normally prefer motions in the negative, such as a motion to deny,
Right.
is if you had a motion to deny and it only got 1 vote, would that mean that it passed? And it doesn't. It just means that the motion to deny failed. But if it were to get 3, if there was a motion to approve and it got 3 no votes, it would be over and the agenda item would be concluded. If there was a motion to deny and it got 3 yes votes,
Then what?
that too would conclude the agenda item.
So I want
I
to,
think the applicant deserves to hear the opinion of the commission, so for the sake of clarity, I'm going to move for approval of this item so that we can vote on it.
And under Robert's rules, that's generally the procedure.
Right. And you need a second.
All right, Commissioner Rich made a motion for approval. Can I get a second? I see none. That's the end.
I would like to motion to deny.
Don't really
I
take
can't
votes.
do that.
Well, you can do it, but you're looking for a second now.
It's very unusual.
But then if there's 3 affirmative votes for a motion to deny, it's there is resolution and it's done. Versus having it be open and it could come back. Everybody's here tonight. They've taken the time to be here, multiple meetings. I'd like this to be finished or not. And if then we want to move approval,
Under that same thing, if it had gotten a second on the motion from Commissioner Rich and the motion didn't get
Right.
support, that would have concluded as well.
so to have any resolution tonight, we would have to approve
You
a
have a
motion to
motion to
deny.
deny?
Yes, sir.
I'll second it so we can have the vote and determine where we're at.
Okay, so motion to
So
deny.
then you favor in vote, in favor of denying it? Negative motions are odd.
Not the first time. We've done it before.
True.
Madam Mayor, you need to repeat the motion, and it was seconded, and then
I know it.
we'll need to
I
do it.
know.
All right.
I know. We have a.
We need to have
motion for-
discussion.
Yeah, we need discussion because it's a new motion.
So
Would you like discussion? We have a motion to deny.
in a second.
You made the motion to deny,
In a second.
and he seconded.
Yes.
Correct. Any comments from the commissioners?
Just to explain my thinking, the applicant has failed to provide a sufficient basis for me to amend our comprehensive plan by changing the future land use.
Okay, we have a motion, we have a second. Any comments from the,
Can I
Commissioner-
talk about that?
yes, Commissioner Clark?
So, Mr. Baggett, I know that this is not U.S. Constitution in terms of compelling reasons to, or even for a comp plan mentions a compelling reason, but I just know that as a planner myself and just being on this commission and looking at things and looking at the land use issue, from looking at, I did some research with staff and looked at, and I think Mr. Rich had brought this up at the last meeting. We're strictly talking about land use or commercial. We're talking about that Indian Street corridor. We're talking about specifically from Willoughby to Kenner Highway and probably parts beyond, because we're into that whole quadrant there of what's going on in that busy intersection of people coming in all directions in that area. But specifically, multifamily, and I hear the applicant saying that it was commercial, then it went to multifamily in 2017. I was probably here. And then a portion of it was taken out for commercial to meet some needs when that happened. But for the city of Stuart and for what we have, for our land use designations and why we have our land use designations and why we make changes sometimes when things align, whether it's a companion PUD change or even just a regular zoning change, or even the institution of a land use designation. Multifamily is a scarce commodity in the city of Stuart. The people in Willoughby Glen, and I noticed that Willoughby Glen was not listed, maybe because it was at the south side of the conservation area, but Willoughby itself and other areas, Indian Run at the crossing was listed. But the people in that area have been living in both multifamily and single family, as with Willoughby and some of the other developments that are in there. And I remember when that whole project went in, and I just think that for the city, it's an opportunity to latch on and to maintain that multifamily use and to, do whatever comes with it. This whole business idea of whether or not it's a detox or it's a memory care and all these other things, that doesn't have anything to do specifically with the land use. And I know that the applicant talked about the adjacent properties and so on, but I think looking from our city as a whole and what we're looking at to try to maintain and keep and to at least have some appreciable amount of multifamily maintained, and possibly something else may come in there that could use that particular land use. And that is my thinking. I've seen the staff report. It is a tough thing. I've talked to the applicant, but I'm looking from the city's overall comprehensive plan and overall land use designations, and the fact that we have this little gem of multifamily in this area. And I had good long conversations with the applicant about the land use in this area, and I understand their perspective and I appreciate staff looking at it, but that's what I see is just maintaining the that piece of multifamily. I think it fits in with our sense of place and our part of what happens on that street, and everything doesn't have to be the same. And so that's why that's my thinking on the land use. I'm done.
No more comments?
No, I'm done.
No more. Any comments from the public? All right.
I'm confused.
Oh,
We can't do.
Approving this or not?
We're gonna vote on the.
You're not really going to be answering questions from the
Right.
audience. You guys are deliberating, and you should have it on a microphone and public comment if you're going
Right,
to
we
be
can't do that.
talking to the audience.
Mr. Baggett, could you state the motion again?
They're gonna state it, the motion again.
The motion was a motion to deny the application to change the future land use from the current multifamily to commercial.
So when I vote, we'll deny this, the land use change, future land use.
If you vote yes, it's
To deny.
to deny.
Okay. Just to be clear, unless they've already spoken.
Mary?
You know, I
You
do,
should call roll call. Call the roll call.
well, I want to make sure that some people have written 4 and 5. I want to make sure legally I have done this correctly. So should I
Any issues, Lee?
bring up?
No, go on a roll call.
Roll call.
You've
no,
asked.
well, the mayor was saying that if the public
Is it
still
more
needed
five?
to say something, even though we're out of,
I don't want to get anyone any more confused than they already are, and so we'll leave this with 5. So we're going to take a roll call.
On 4.
Number 4 is what we're roll call.
Okay. Commissioner McDonald,
Yes.
Commissioner Collins,
Yes.
Commissioner Clark,
yes.
Mayor Brunner,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Rich.
Yeah.
Motion was to deny.
This meeting is adjourned.
No, we have.
No,
We have.
yeah, we still have to go through item 5,
Okay.
Madam Mayor.
I didn't think we did, but we do.
MXPUD is allowed on commercial, or on multifamily land use. So the relief still needs to be requested if they want to.
Okay. So we have to go through number 5.
The city of Stuart is not the applicant. There's an applicant on on agenda item number 5, and they have the right to go forward if they want to.
I understand.
Okay.
Okay.
5, Clarity Point PUD, rezone from the City of Stuart official zoning atlas from residential plan development, or PUD, to the mixed use plan unit development. Would you like to speak?
Yes, ma'am, sorry about that. The request before you, again, Brad Curry for the record, the request before you would be to change this property to a zoning district that's actually not allowed in the residential, multifamily residential. So the zoning request is moot at this point. It doesn't make sense to move forward with it. So we would respectfully request to withdraw the zoning application at this time.
Okay.
Okay, that's it.
Thank you.
This meeting is now adjourned. Adjourned at 6:58.
Thank you guys all for coming and spending your evening.